Welcome everyone to the Restore podcast. So welcome guys to the Restore podcast with me, Owen Walker. I'm here today with colleague, friend and legend, Jason Fox. Welcome, mate.
Hello, mate. Thanks very much for that.
Yeah. No worries, mate. No worries at all. So just wanted to have a chat with you today, Jason. So a couple of things really, as I'm sure you're aware. So running this podcast, it really is just built on self-care. Having been a critical care paramedic for the past 6 years, done London Hems, the air ambulance for 10 years and been in the job for 20 years, I really realized that a lot of people, a lot of paramedics don't take care of themselves. And so the premise of this podcast is just around self-care and mental health really. And not only my own mental health, but other people's. And what I really wanted to infer through these episodes, mate, is how people navigate mental health, but also just in life as well. So just for listeners that might not have, just starting at the start, Jason, just for listeners that might not be aware, what's a bit of your background, mate?
So I joined the military at a young age at 16. Did Royal Marines training, spent just shy of 10 years in the Marines, and then did Special Forces training selection and spent another 10 years in the Special Forces. I did that around, just post 2001 really. And then was in the military when I suppose it was quite busy, and enjoyed my job, believed in what I was doing, and enjoyed the people that I worked with. And I think that last 10 years in the noughties and just beyond was quite hectic, and it did not. I don't think it did have an impact on me, and it took me a little bit of time to navigate that and work out what I needed to get me back on the straight and narrow. So, excuse me, 2012, I got medically discharged from the Her Majesty's Forces with PTSD, and so then I had a journey there, working out why that was and what I needed to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I can really resonate with that with that myself. And we'll touch on some of that stuff actually in a bit, Jason, because I think that's powerful, and just that journey of self exploration and understanding things and processing different things. But just looking back at your career, mate, so quite similar really in regards to we both did 20. I've done 20 years and very much looking to get out myself and stop seeing as many sort of dead people, but also so we both did 20 years. But I think some of the fundamental prerequisites you were talking about in a high performing team, because I'm really interested in high performing teams, and just how as a critical care paramedic within an advanced paramedic scheme, one of the prerequisites is just doing the basics well, and changing different domains just into different high pressure situations, but also just sticking to the basics well. And one thing, so I just like to get your perspective on that, and also your perspective on situation awareness, because one thing it's taught me of 20 years as a paramedic is just I've kind of developed this good situation awareness where I can sort of step back from myself, realize when I'm getting overwhelmed just by individual stresses, and just start to. It wasn't always that way. I've had plenty of times when I've got it wrong, but I've started to develop sort of better situation awareness over the last few years. Was that the same? Could you say that the same of you as a sort of military operator?
Mate, it was like listening to myself then. Yeah, I mean, doing things like this is great as well, because this brings even more personal awareness, because you're like, I'm listening to you and I'm like, yeah. And even though I've sort of maybe had that conversation with myself about how my life has gone, it's still good to listen to someone else, because then it's, whether you reaffirm or I'm learning from you, I don't know, but that's what I think happens. And I find it difficult to go back to being a 16-year-old recruit learning, because I'm like, how was I then? Was I someone that got freaked out at the drop of a pin, or was I just someone naturally that was naturally okay with high pressured, stressful situations, which I don't think is the case, because there's plenty of times where I would lose my whatever, and I'd have to sort of learn how to deal with that situation. So it is definitely, I've been a work in progress, that's for sure. But I think what I do is I do thrive on chaos.
Yeah.
I don't mean that in a bad way, and I don't want that to be the case, but little things really, really bother me more than if something's gone batshit, I'm like, I find it easier to slow things down.
Mm.
I see red mist a lot quicker with just ridiculous stuff, and it annoys me. It does annoy me. But that aside, the whole situational awareness thing, I think it does come down a lot to personal awareness, as in your own emotions, being able to, whether it's, people say it's compartmentalization. I think it's just acknowledging different situations that you're in and using your emotion in a positive way, whether it's fear, anxiety, whatever, and just harnessing it and then making it focus you on what you need to do. And then we come straight back to the basics done well. Everyone thinks, and I'm sure it's the same, and in fact I know it's the same because it's the way I think about your profession 100%. Everyone thinks that being a special forces soldier is cool and you do amazing stuff and you know how to do crazy stuff, and it's just cool, and it isn't. The whole thing comes down to doing all the basic stuff really well. If you can do that, you can do the rest of it, because that then becomes second nature. The stuff that really matters, which is the basics of your job, becomes second nature. You don't need to think about that as much. That gets done well, and you can focus on all the other little bits and pieces that fine tune whatever profession you're in, I think.
Yeah, I'd 100% agree with you, Foxy mate. I think exactly the same. And what I've realised, so it's similar to what you were just saying actually around sort of seeing red mist, and I get really pissed off when there's lots of noise and stresses, and because it's about detecting sort of the next in the hierarchy of need, the next right thing to do. And so what I need to do is I need to silence all the noise, be it the screaming parents or the actually, you know, the suction unit or the alarms on the monitors. I get everything off, and I'm like, right, okay, now I need to see clearly what the next right thing to do is. And one thing I've realized about myself as well, I get really pissed off when things are really difficult. I've had some really difficult situations recently, and I developed this kind of internal sense of Tourette's, but I try and not like verbalize it. I just kind of keep it in my mind. And I'm like, why is this so difficult? And but yeah, I just kind of just learn to sort of breathe through that, and then share the mental model and kind of just get through it. But yeah, it has been challenging. But one of the things I wanted to sort of look at with you really is through my history of kind of reaching out of just pre-hospital and looking at the jungle and the desert and some of the stuff I've done in both environments and some of the domains you've been in the jungle, in the desert, underwater, on the water, and about extreme environments. One of the fundamental things I've realized is just around good self-care in these environments, because as the environment becomes more extreme, just the better you have to just look after yourself, your own hydration, your own kit, good kit husbandry, good prep. Have you found that to be the same, especially when sort of leading other people, sort of just really that sense of drilling down?
Yeah, it can't, again, the basic sort of thing we spoke about earlier. But I'd say I've become, as I've learned my craft, and I've moved away from it now, admittedly, but I do tap into it, you know, expedition wise and all this sort of stuff. But as I've learned it, I've become a bit of a pest with regard to like kit and how things need to be, and like when I pack a rucksack, there is a certain way it needs to be, and if it doesn't look like, when I go and load the boot up in the car, I'm like a real, it's, I don't know. Sometimes I think like, do I need to chill out, or
Yeah.
is that a good thing? But
No, I know what you
but
mean.
anyway, but going back, yes, it is like the only thing that gets you through. So it, you know, from after the military, I've gone and done a few expeditions and I'm not an expert in, say, canoeing. I'm not a world class canoer. I'm not Olympic canoer. I'm not. I am 100% not an Olympic rower. But I've gone and done things that involve that. But it isn't that skill that matters.
Yeah.
It's the basic stuff that everyone should have learned as a child, which is washing yourself. Have you washed yourself properly? Is like, I don't mean to sound weird, but have you washed your groin properly so it's not going to start rotting? So you have got no other worries going on.
Yeah.
You get like all that stuff that's really, really important allows you to focus then on the stuff that you're not an expert at,
Yeah.
or that requires a lot more thought. Like skills that you really do need to fine tune or you need to really think about. And I think because of that, those expeditions don't freak me out before I go into them. Okay, there might be some minutes of freaking out because the admin's absolutely all over the place, but the it's the fact that the whole thing doesn't freak me out, because I know, I'm not being like cocky or anything, I know how to look after myself basically, and that's all that really matters. What happens if I get a blister? I know how to deal with that because I've had them before, and I've focused on that being an important thing. So I go and look at that and make sure that I keep that on under wraps. Keep it at bay. So yeah, it's definitely probably the key to especially with regard to operating in weird environments or environments that we're not used to, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think one of the ways, just probably me and you are quite similar, is actually just looking at the lockdown and the social isolation. I'm kind of busier than ever. Not just at work, but just on days off. And I think the capacity to keep yourself busy and keep yourself occupied mentally and physically is something. Even in the extreme environments, when I've been 6 weeks in the jungle and feel like I'm going stir crazy, but actually keeping myself occupied with many little tasks and keeping my physical fitness up. Is that something that you found over this time period, and when you're away, you can just keep yourself busy?
I probably have a better routine when I'm away or in lockdown than I do in my normal life now, because I don't know really what normal life is, but there's always meetings and stuff, and I'm always in a rush.
Yeah.
Now, I am busy now, but there is definitely more of a routine. I know that each day I'm told by the government I've got an hour to go out and do an exercise, or 45 minutes, whatever the government guidance is, that's what I do. Don't worry. But I get, so that's set in stone. Me and my missus Jules will go out and we'll do some exercise together. It's actually, I'd say, I've surprised myself in the fact that I'm actually all right living with someone. I didn't even know that before. So this lockdown is like an expedition. Because on an expedition or going away to these far flung places, you have to have a routine, because that comes back to the basics, and that's what gets you through the hardships of being on an expedition, because there are hardships even though we love it. Whereas lockdowns are slightly different. It's not as hard, but it is, because mentally we don't really know what's going on. We don't know what this is going to look like, the landscape afterwards. But you have to have a routine, because we can't control that. So why are we worried about something we can't control? It's a bizarre thing, but what we can control is our routine and what we do. That doesn't mean, there's been a few days where I've sort of like not got up early, sort of like, I don't know, sort of basting the fact that I don't have to get up. So, but other than that, outside of the odd occasion, we know it's quite important, because on those days we probably feel a little bit crap.
Yeah.
Whereas on the days where you sort your routine out and get up and do stuff, you little, whatever they are, they're really important. They're really important to making you function as a human properly. And that in itself, like having that, I suppose it's discipline, makes you feel good about yourself, means your mental health is on the right track, and then everything else doesn't fall apart. Physically doesn't fall apart.
Yeah. So I would entirely agree with that, Jason. I think it's quite interesting you say that, mate, because a couple of things really about control and what you were saying earlier as well about just that that tendency for chaos. And I think, you know, treading into a lot of chaotic situations myself and bringing a sense of control and order, and or just sort of some kind of sequential order to some really chaotic situations. But actually, that what that does for me, it pushes me out of my, it's continually pushed me out of my comfort zone, to the point where sometimes I can't even see my comfort zone. You know, you get out of the car and there's just carnage around you, and trying to bring a sense of control to that. You know, and in a sense, I vibe off that as a paramedic and as a HEMS paramedic and critical care paramedic, just bringing that sense of control to it, but or order, not control necessarily. Because I think one of the things, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about this, Jason, is I've really had to come to terms with the kind of failure, and not failure necessarily that I can't do what I want to do. Sometimes that occurs anyway, but actually that the patient's going to die regardless what I do. And almost the story is written. The story is written regardless of how good the team is, how much we're preparing, how well I have my shit together. The end point is almost written, and I've had to come to terms with failure, lots really, and to the point where I hopefully now just it just rolls off my back in a way. Sometimes it still gets to me a bit, but have you had to sort of do the same over your career, and even sort of now, mate, in sort of TV and other aspects?
Yeah. I think I've failed a lot. There's a lot of things that I've not achieved at, or times when I've not achieved them. And I used to really take it badly. I used to beat myself up a lot. And then I think I went through a phase where I consciously made sure that I didn't beat myself up. But it's weird when I think about it now. It's like I know that I consciously said that, but it sort of happened subconsciously. I can't even work that one out.
Yeah.
And then it's got to the point now where things don't quite go right, or I fail at something, or I think I fail at something. But instead of dwelling on it, I just try and look at a way that the next time I can do it better. And if it doesn't happen that way, it doesn't happen that way, because there's a lot of other uncontrollables that happen at a certain given time, and it's got nothing. It's all like it's like the stars aligning. That's the analogy I use. You know, just because I'm doing something at a certain time it doesn't necessarily mean I've done something wrong to make myself fail in what I'm trying to do, because there's all sorts of other uncontrollables. You know, there's how many people are on this planet, there's environments are changing all the time, the weather changes, all these different things. And it doesn't mean that you've failed. You might have made a bad call, or in your you know, when you with hindsight you say, oh, I've made a bad call, but you probably didn't. It's just you're just a human being reacting, or trying to act, be proactive, and trying to, you know, you're trying to second guess. We're always trying to second guess, no matter what we're doing. We're like, you know, how am I going to act if this happens? And then something from nowhere, you know, the curveball comes in, you're like, bosh, and all you're doing is reacting to that. And it doesn't necessarily sometimes, but what you can do is that as you go through life, I'm rambling now, I'm really sorry, but as you go through life doing all these different things and things happening, is you're building up knowledge on what could happen next time. And so you're just becoming a more rounded person as we go on. I genuinely still see myself as a kid that's just fucking constantly soaking up stuff and trying to learn. Obviously I'm forgetting a lot of it. I've damaged so many brain cells over the course of time that I'm not as good at retaining. But I think that's the way I look at it. It's like, don't be so worried about failing, because essentially it's just you becoming a more rounded character. And if you're putting yourself under pressure a lot of the time, that's not a bad thing either, because you're just basically, what you're doing is as a kid, you're comfortable with certain things, but then as you get older, you put yourself in, theoretically you should put yourself into a difficult situation that probably you're not comfortable with. You learn how to deal with it, then you're comfortable with that situation. And that's just called progression. That was a massive ramble, but I think
Yeah, that was good. I think there was some really good stuff actually, mate. There was some good stuff actually. One question I would ask people if I'm mentoring them is, how much failure have you got in your life? Because if you've got no failure in your life, you're probably not coming to the fringes of your competence or capacity. And actually, I think, yeah, like you just said, actually, if you're always navigating it with inside your competence, you're probably not growing as a person. So I fundamentally agree with that actually, Roxy. No, I do. Just in on that point, so around communication, how, like, so when I'm on scene and things are getting stressful, I'm trying to do a bit of closed loop communication. So, I'll try and get a read receipt from people, or give people a read receipt. Like, so this is what I've heard. This is what I want you to do. Can you do it? And I'll get that back from them. Eye contact. I'll try and use my non-verbals as much as possible. And also sort of de-escalate. Well, I've realized over the past 20 years, just de-escalating people through non-verbal and verbal communication, trying to summarize things. So just getting complex situations down to a coherent and like basic narrative. It was, and just de-escalate the scene as much as possible. Are those all kind of facets and traits that you use and or have used in the past in a military capacity?
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the most important things, like that communication. Communication, whether it's when you're not actually with someone or you're with someone, makes people they don't feel alone.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds weird. When you're with someone, if you don't talk to them, they'll feel alone. If you talk to them, it's like being in a team so as a special forces soldier, being in a team about to go into an extreme, a situation where someone is probably going to try and kill you. You could be, this is really, I'm taking it down to a very, very low level form of communication now. You could be lined up against the wall, ready to go in the doorway. It's been hectic anyway. And you could be that front person. Now, there's people around you because you can hear all the chaos, but you're a human being and you are petrified. You are petrified. However, this is the simplest form. All the people behind you, the back person, when he's ready, grabs the other bloke's shoulder and squeezes it. Just gives it a couple of squeezes, firm. That bloke then passes it on. Now that means, right, I'm the back person and I'm good to go. So whenever you're ready, let's crack on. But I think more importantly, it's that human contact of saying you're not alone, and just we can take as much time as we like. Now that's the basic one, but I think listening to you then talking about the de-escalation and stuff like that, you sometimes you're in a position of authority, really. I suppose you turn up at a scene, absolute chaos. You've had the training, so that means that you are probably the authority at a certain place in time. And then because of your training, you start to sort of compartmentalize. You look at what's going on, and then you start talking to people, and you talk with confidence and authority. Whether you are confident or an authoritative is a different matter. It doesn't matter, actually. It doesn't matter at all, because you talk and you're like, right, that's that. Right. If you can just sit down there, that then makes people just chill out.
Yeah.
But then also it reaffirms to you that everything's cool. You're giving yourself your own form of de-escalation. Do you know what I mean? Because you're being so 100%. I think where everything breaks down is communication. And it's also about the form of communication. People being on lockdown have probably had all sorts of hectic arguments, and actually and I'm bad as well. If you just like chill and like talk properly and with confidence, it chills people out. But comms, we call it comms in the military, communication, no matter how basic, whether it's a squeeze of the shoulder or a proper technical debrief on what's been going on, makes people, it makes you feel good, and it makes people feel good. You feel part of something, and you feel like you know what's going on to a certain degree.
Yeah, you're right, and you're right. It adds to that. It certainly adds to that situation awareness, doesn't it? When I think, yeah, like I said, when what I've learned as well is just about silencing the micro conversations and just have one macro conversation. Have one conversation that everyone is part of, and then everyone's on the same page and on the same level. And I think just silencing those micro conversations just means it's all coming through one person, and we've all got that more collective situation awareness, which, yeah, when it's all going to shit, is exactly what you need, actually. Yeah, gosh, mate. So just looking at, one of the things, just looking at self-awareness, actually, because I've really had to figure out my own personal triggers, like we spoke about before, what really triggers me, just, to see, red mist and or gets my emotions up. And what I'm trying to do is navigate my triggers now to a place where there's a stimulus and response, and making sure that stimulus doesn't flick me over into this immediate red mist response. So just having to open the gap up so I can stop myself reacting. Have you is that something that are you do you have you had to navigate what are your triggers, number one, and number two is how do you navigate your triggers?
I don't know what my triggers are. People not listening to me, probably. That's my trigger.
Yeah.
I don't know why, and I think that maybe that's come from the military.
Yeah.
My faults are if things are going wrong, I'll look for an out.
Yeah.
Because in the military, if things are going wrong, you come out and then reset and then look at a different way of doing things, and that doesn't work in real life. And I suppose, yeah, people not listening to me can be a frustration. But the weird thing is, I've thought about triggers and that, because people talk about military people. And I'm going to use this as an example because that's where I've come from. But everyone thinks that we're like in battle, and I'm thinking about in battle that everyone's like super aggressive and just angry balls of fire running around all over the place. It couldn't be further from the truth. Now I can be angry, and it annoys me, because the reason it annoys me is because I've seen myself in situations that involve extreme violence and not nice things, and yet you're probably the most compassionate person in those moments. You're super cool, chilled, just going about doing your business, and then people are in different states of whatever, and then you can go into being compassionate and caring for people. It confuses me, if I'm honest. But I know what I need to do to control things. I need to take a step back, and that's what I do. I need to be given that opportunity to take a step back, because then I know everything can cool down. Otherwise, we're all human. I'm human, and I lose my shit. I don't want to.
Yeah.
But it's about, the more you learn about yourself, the more you understand how you theoretically should understand how you control certain things that you don't necessarily like or agree with.
Yeah, no, 100% actually, and just having to being able to step back from that, I do agree, and I do a bit of square breathing every so often, just when things aren't either going the way I want them to, or there's just something which is really triggering me, from a colleague or someone else, and just learning, you're right, to control your own physiology, just your heart rate, and then actually gives me a bit of clarity. As you were saying, just to step back into that situation and be a bit more level-headed and just pragmatic, but to I think it's just I've caught myself, and I've not caught myself in the past, when I react really quickly to a member of staff, or I'm sharp back to someone super quick, and then realize that actually that makes the dynamic. And I've just yesterday managed to catch myself just before I said something, and I was like, "Oi!" and I just took a breath, and then let it go, and then kind of came at it just a lot more calmly. And I thought, oh, I've just saved myself. I've just probably saved myself about 20 minutes or 30 minutes of grief there. And it's not about not confronting situations, but I guess it's confronting it in the right way, whereby you still get the best out of the team in a moment and then talk about it later. And when it's not such a pressure situation. But it's definitely a journey of exploration. I would definitely agree with that. Yeah, it was on my tongue yesterday, and I managed to sort of reel it back in, and kind of, it was good.
I had a thing yesterday, and I've told this story a couple of times, but I'm doing I was doing some stuff this last week, some very low level sort of support to different places around the country. In fact, yesterday I was bouncing around a couple of different hospitals in London and just doing clean up and stuff like that. And I was at St Mary's, in Paddington. I don't know, and we'd done our stuff, and we were like, there was 3 of us, and we were like, we'll go down to the shop to get a bottle of water. And obviously there's nothing going on in London. I'm stood at the crossroads, and I'm like trying to look for a shop that's open. And as I'm stood there, the other 2 lads I'm with, they're on the other side of the road looking at me. All of a sudden, I just get whacked by, I'm going to rant about this, and I know my missus can hear me downstairs, and she's like, "He's fucking going on about this again." But it's funny. I got whacked from behind by someone on a motorized car. These scooters, mate. They're dangerous. I genuinely very nearly lost my. I lost it. Nearly did. But I checked myself. But it wasn't. I'm not taking credit for checking myself. The thing that stopped me and checked me and stopped that situation being a real nightmare was the 2 blokes that were in front of me, looking back at me, laughing. And then going back to you, there was an ambulance parked up with 2 paramedics in it, and I looked over and they were pissing themselves laughing as well. And I was just like, looked at this person that just blindly ran into me. They cracked on, sped off at Mach 10, and I was like, okay, the situation isn't as bad.
Yeah.
It didn't need that reaction that I was quite willing to go enter into, and that that was something else that was able to check me. But there are times where I have actually been like, right, hang on, before this, I wish I could do this a lot because it would make my life a lot easier. But the breathing thing is 100% probably the most important thing, because it lowers all your stress levels. Just to actually think about, if you go back to the basics of living, surviving, breathing, if you have to think about it, everything else just, there's a lot of realization that you just need to concentrate on the really important stuff and not this. What's going on here and there.
Definitely, absolutely. Just de-escalates myself and like I said, probably yourself. But you're right. The power of being able to laugh at the situation, and I'm just trying to turn it around and just laugh at some of these situations that I find myself in, because you think, actually, I don't want to take myself too seriously, and B, it's probably a better response than going into one and just being just difficult with people.
I always try and look at it like, I still do things that I'm not pleased about, and when I look back, it's like, it's about being cool, and losing your shit is not cool, is it? I always, as fickle as that sounds, I'm like, try and be cool. There's a reason why it's called being cool, because it means you're just a little bit less red.
Exactly. Right, exactly. So just pivoting slightly and looking at sort of self-care, just navigating self-care from a place of just understanding yourself and understanding what needs to be talked about. Certainly. So I was just talking to you just before we started this podcast around, I've had to actually speak to my parents and a few other people about some of the horrendous, just dealing with kids without parents over the last few weeks, and having to break bad news to them, and And I really struggled with that actually for a short while afterwards, and just had to talk about it and just try and process it, and then just let it go. And um, just a couple of situations that are really difficult, but realized that actually, I can't deal with it myself just on my own, because it is probably too much and I can't always make sense of it myself. And B, it's just good to talk and just good to reprocess stuff and see, let things go, that I was never going to be able to save the father or the mother in these situations. Is that something have you orchestrated a similar, have you just sought community with some of the things you've had to deal with?
I think I was good at that. I went through a phase where I was really, really poor at it. And I think when I realized that I was being poor at dealing with those sort of situations, I had to be a little bit more, I had to be conscious of who I was and how I deal with situations. And then I had to be conscious about thinking about what I was like before I had this issue. Mm. And it was about going back to that and resetting and understanding that I need to be a lot more youthful in my mindset. Yeah. As in, what do I mean by that? As you get older, you get to a point where, like, how do I not do that? How do I do, like, this is just becoming too much. Whereas I used to be really good at I suppose it's the art of not giving a fuck. And then, you know, there's a book that's entitled that, but I never read it. But then you come through all these different situations, and then I'm trying to work out why I'm thinking about things badly and the decisions I made. I used to get freaked out by all the decisions I made because that led to something else happening. And, you know, same sort of thing, but in a different vein. Kids were affected, and I could see the psychological impact of that. And I'm like, I'm now responsible for that person's, all these different things. And then I suddenly realized, and the realization came when I was sat in a wooded area on a bench, and I just saw a kid playing with a mum, and the kid must have been like toddler age, sort of 18 months, 2 years old, just running around, doing its own thing, really loving life, would fall over, hurt itself, bawl its eyes out, get back up and do it exactly the same again. You're like that. And not really care about the stuff that happened because it wasn't in control. Mm. It was just, and I was like, I need to be more like that. I need to go back to being that person that understands there's nothing in control, but don't be scared of anything, because it might not happen again. It might do, but you know, that's just life. Mm. And I think it's a curse getting older sometimes, because we learn too much and we overthink things, and we're governed by our experience through life. But that doesn't mean it's going to keep happening. And if it does happen again, does it really matter? It's just another stepping stone to, you know, I suppose it's something like that.
Yeah, I think that's powerful, actually. I think you're right. The power you're saying there, Fox, about just getting back up and actually not thinking too much about it, but B, just becoming youthful again in understanding these things are going to happen. You just have to get back up. And I think that what that harkens that kind of notions to is just that sense of grit and determination, and just actually, some things are shit in life. And, you know, I had to do this exactly the same with this. You know, I had a daughter of 6, 10 and 12 sat in front of me, and it was awful, you know, and a couple of other situations like it where I've had young kids who, and I'm just going to get over it. I'm just going to get up again, get back to work. Number one, I didn't actually want to take any time. I think take time off is maybe not the right answer, but number two, process it with other people. And number three is, you know, just a bit of grit and determination about these things, because actually it's especially with failure and stuff, it's actually better to push on through with that community as well, but just understand that don't take yourself too seriously. Don't take the situation too seriously. Learn from it what you can. And yeah, that's really helped me through actually over these past few weeks and months with some really tricky things. But it sounds very similar to you, to be honest, mate, with certain things.
I think with going back to what you do and what a lot of people are doing at the moment out there, which is, I mean, awesome. The situation is always going to have been there. You've
Yeah.
just come in to see if there's another route out.
Yeah.
And if there isn't, it's you coming in is just a nice to have. Do you know what I mean? And if there isn't a route out, then there probably wasn't a route out.
Yeah.
And you then go on to another situation where you look for another. You're just, I suppose you're a guide for some people, but some people they've gone too far down a certain path that they're not going to come back off.
Yeah.
And I think that, I think I hope that's a good way to look at it,
Yeah.
because this path that some people are on is no one's. There's all sorts of things on the media about whose fault it is. It's here,
Yeah.
and all you can do is, like we keep talking about, is control the controllables, and do what you can to see if you can bring a positive from something. If you can't, you can't. You've done your best. You've not gone there to fuck it up.
Yeah.
You've gone there to see if there's another path out of there. If there isn't, there isn't. You've got to be like, okay, cool. Let's go on. Let's move forward. Let's see what we can actually achieve. And if there's something to learn, if there's something to learn from it, but don't dwell on it, because that's not going to do you any favors.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and you're right. And every cloud's got a silver lining. Just being able to laugh at yourself. I was in PPE the other day, yesterday, just having to put this massive, big suit on. I stood on one leg trying to drag this PPE on, end up falling over on my arse, like whilst putting PPE on, rolling around on the floor, and just thinking, what am I doing? And just being able, the power of being able to just take a step back and just think, this is. But yeah.
That not taking yourself serious is really important.
Yeah.
I spoke to a friend of mine the other day, and we were doing a job at a certain time with a certain group of people, and it was awesome. It was probably one of my heydays, and this guy was he was my boss. We were chatting about it, and he was like, why was that group, why was that squadron, that body of individuals, why did everything seem so easy? And I said, well, looking back on it, I think, first of all, we took the job seriously, but can you remember, not one of us took ourselves seriously? And there's a lot to be said for that. I don't know why.
Brilliant.
There just is.
Yeah.
I can remember, again, low level, just being in Norway, getting in and out of a tent in Norway in the military is a kerfuffle. Before you get into the actual tent, you've got to take your boots off. You've got a brush dedicated to brushing snow off, because again, it's about all the basics done well and not getting water into the tent because it will freeze and make life just miserable. Taking everything off, and then you're trying to climb into the tent. I've got a multi-tool, like a Leatherman on my thing, that's caught on the tent, and I'm like, all I'm trying to do is go to bed, and my life is utter, and like everyone's laughing at me, and you're like, okay, yeah. It's all that. It's like, I suppose that's my version of your PPE story. Where it's just like,
oh, it is a nightmare. It is, but you're right. There's power. There is real power in that, actually, and absolutely, and it just de-escalates the whole thing, and just makes things a little bit more easy to manage. But just coming into land, Jason, just on sort of the last question, really, because just there's a lot of fear around at the moment, and it's almost a culture of fear inbred with the news and stuff, and I suppose the ecosystem you've had to work in and still do. And same for me is, you could easily perceive it from a couple of different angles, really. One of fear, or another one of just getting on with it and actually staying in your domain, and just doing the basics well and sticking to what you know. But how, my question really would be to you is, how do you harness fear to your benefit, mate? Either personally or publicly, or or within team?
If I what I do now, and this is something I've learned recently, is if I feel an emotion taking hold of me, I'll stop for however long I've got and however long is practical. I'll stop and start looking at what that is, what's happening. Now, I used to do this subconsciously when I was in the military, because you're a fine-tuned, person, professional that has trained a lot and can do this subconsciously. Whereas now I'm a bit more like, right, why do I feel like this? Explore that. And then think, right, what do I need to do to turn that emotion into a positive? Because if I don't acknowledge it, it's going to just become a negative, where I become a flapping headless chicken and I'm like running all over the place. Or I'm like, right, I'm fearful of something. Why am I scared? Oh, right, okay, yeah, that's because of that. That means I'm allowed to be scared. What do I do to get out of this? Or what do I do to alleviate that? Oh, I do this, or I concentrate on, what it is that I need to concentrate on to get the job done. So it's more about, I suppose, emotional awareness? Is that a way of sort of, because fear is an emotion, which means you're allowed to feel it, but it's what you do with that that is the important thing. It's not important that you feel scared, because that's you're going to feel scared because you're obviously scared of something. But what do you do with that emotion? It's the same with anger. I wish I was better at harnessing anger, but fear I'm very good at harnessing. Some of the others I need to work on, but that's I think that's
I think
that's what it is. It's like
No, I agree. I 100% agree, and I would absolutely say that. And they say, what is it? Bravery is not the absence of fear; it's fear that said its prayers. It's just it's not feeling fearful. It's what you do with that emotion, which can then help you perform and navigate.
I think it's a good thing to feel it. I think it becomes dangerous if you start to lose that. I think people go through stages and phases in life where they might lose their emotional connection, and that's when you're probably at your most vulnerable, whether that's professionally or more whatever. Because there's been times where I've not felt scared, and that's a dangerous thing. I think, and people shouldn't be ashamed of emotions, whether because it just means that you're a human being. In fact, you should celebrate feeling fearful or angry or whatever it is. I think it's a good thing.
I think that's an excellent place to finish off, actually, Jason, because I think you're right, and it can safeguard a lot of things, really, as a feedback mechanism, and acknowledging it, doing the right thing with it. But it's probably there to protect you and keep you safe in a lot of situations, really. So I do agree. Listen, you're a legend. I've really appreciated just your time today, because it's been
no, mate, not at all.
An hour. But I really have appreciated it. And just so if people want to find you, I guess they can find you online and
Instagram, all those sort of weird things. I don't know. Yeah. All the things I used to absolutely detest, but yeah.
Absolutely. Listen, you're a legend, and thanks for talking today, mate.
Mate, awesome. Thanks so much.
Pleasure.